Nearly 20 years after the European Union's Big Bang enlargement in 2004, the bloc's long-stalled ambition to accept new members has experienced a striking revival. Beyond the moral and geopolitical arguments for the EU's east expansion, is there also a business case to be made? I'm very pleased to have the speakers here with us today at the session. On my left, Milojko Spajic, Prime Minister of Montenegro. Thank you very much. Also, we have with us Rostislav Šurma, Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Maria Gabriel, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. Thank you. And Christian Levin, President and Chief Executive Officer, Scania from Sweden, Alliance of CEO Climate Lead. Welcome to everybody who is joining us here in the room at Davos at the World Economic Forum annual meeting. The geopolitical and moral case for EU enlargement is clear. Now, if done right, it will bring greater stability to the EU's eastern neighbourhood and provide incredible economic opportunities to tens of millions of Europeans outside the EU borders. But what's in it for EU voters concerned about jobs, concerned about inflation, and what's in it for businesses concerned about the EU's stagnating productivity? Let's start with you, Prime Minister.
So I think I'll start from the perspective that is not often seen in Europe, because as a Japanese student, I would take a perspective maybe from the Far East. As you might remember, in the 1986, we had Plaza Accord that basically had currencies of Japan, Germany, and France heavily appreciating after that, and then we have the dollar being devalued. What it did to Japan, you had like 20 years of, they call it lost decades. They had like big issues, structural issues that happened afterwards. We didn't see that in Europe. And nobody ever actually noticed that. At least in Europe, I don't see many people talking about it. And that's an obvious case to me that even the big countries such as Germany, France, etc., they definitely have benefits of joining EU. And having such a big market to cushion all of these external big pressures, big factors that are like this, was something that, Germany and France, they continued growth, didn't have any big bubbles. Until 2008, there was a global financial crisis. But before that, they didn't face the same destiny that Japan faced.
Let's ask some of the existing members. Deputy Prime Minister Maria Gabriel, what's your take on this?
Well, I think that first, when we talk about jobs, I think that we need to think about young people and people with skills. And the enlargement is always showing that we have access to those young people that will not leave their region. They will stay and they will be there really to co-create, to shape the solutions of the future. The second, if you'd like to attract investment, we need to connect different regions. We need to have infrastructure, energy or climate. All these, in order to expand the market, we need really the enlargement. And finally, even for inflation, let's be very honest, there is a lot of external factors for inflation, and enlargement is transforming them into something that we can manage, that we can control even, and at least to mainstream and to reduce some of the risks. So I definitely see benefits much more than risks.
Yeah, and finally, the business perspective.
Yeah, coming out of a small country such as Sweden, we can only be the witness of free trade is working. Free trade is what is creating wealth. So there is no reason why we should not be able to tell the young people, the future workforce, the consumers, that this is a threat. It's not a threat.
Deputy Prime Minister Gabriel, let me continue here with you. You have served 2 terms in the European Commission and now serve as the Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria, which makes you just perfectly placed to explain some of the tensions over enlargement between the EU Commission and the Member States on one hand and among Member States on the other. Now, what accounts for this and how can we overcome this? Would a stronger business case help, or would geopolitics and domestic politics continue to get in the way there?
And maybe if I can add that before I was in the European Parliament.
Yes.
So you have the institutional triangle with experience in the European Parliament, the Commission, and now in the Council. Well, I think that we should make an additional effort really not to separate the different arguments, because when we talk about solidarity, the transformative power of enlargement, that means business case, that means new opportunities for business, for investment, how we can increase the attractiveness. And for me, enlargement in that case, it's always shared values. We need to talk about this because it's something that we share in this difficult world, rule of law, democracy. It's also our capacity to respond to global challenges. That's enlargement. That's what we need to address. Okay, if we show to our citizens that on a daily basis, in their daily life, there are benefits, we'll be much more able to convince them. So I think that on one side, we have always to put a little bit more visibility on the strengths. On the other side, of course, there are challenges, because what is the alternative? I think that there is no alternative, but we need to address the challenges. And these challenges are internal, both for EU and the countries that would like to be members of the European Union. In that case, I must say that we need to address some of the internal reforms that we need in the European Union. I think that we need to change the approach. When I was Digital Commissioner, that was the regional roaming agreement. That was so an important step. Now we have the innovation agenda. There is so many young, talented people in the region. Digital innovation hubs, how they're working in deep tech or in fintech. I think that we need really now to talk a little bit more, and much more, I must say, on this positive side.
Christian Levin, Scania has a unique perspective to contribute, because your company invested heavily in some of those 2004 accession countries, like Poland, for example. What are some of the advantages a global European company like Scania was able to gain back from that 2004 enlargement, and what risks and opportunities for European businesses do you see in the current range of candidate countries?
Yeah, look, Scania is a global company, but we are also very European. We have, let's say, 50% of our customers are European-based, 75% of our suppliers are European-based. If we think about our factory footprint, it's in France, it's in the Netherlands, it's in Poland, and it's in Sweden. So it's a kind of a dependence that we have, interdependence that we have. If we only take since 2004, the Polish economy, if I'm rightly informed, has grown about 3 times since then. Our sales of vehicles to Poland and the total Polish market has increased 5 times. If we look to our services sales, which is so important for the profitability of a company supplying trucks, has increased 10 times. So that's just giving you the magnitude. And the Polish hauliers today, with more than 1 million vehicles, are dominating the European haulage industry. Polish drivers, extremely important to keep Europe rolling, and Ukrainian drivers, we saw when they were moving back after the full-scale invasion of Russia, when they were moving back to defend their country, there was a shock to the European manufacturing system, because we were suddenly lacking 30,000 Ukrainian drivers. So there are a lot of parallels also when you look size-wise, and we are in Ukraine also since 30 years. Mm-hmm. We have our own workshops, our own importership, our own head office there. And we see no reason why Ukraine could not follow and be a future Poland from our point of view. And we can only encourage other private companies to take the advantage to come to Ukraine and invest in Ukraine already now. We, as an example, are doing our best year ever. We did our best year ever, 2023, in Ukraine, based on the huge need of transport that is coming, partly because of the war and partly because of the development. As part of the EU, I think we would see this development not only for Ukraine, but we would see it for Montenegro, we would see it for other countries joining the EU in a very similar manner. And some of the new markets here in the EU are very competitive. And that's good for us.
Well, that's the question, right? How it is good, but yet could it be tricky then? Also with some of the challenges of other competitiveness.
Well, you could see that as a challenge, or you could see that as an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity. I think it would be very good for us to have a bit of a more internal competition in Europe. I think we have become a little bit fat and happy, and you see productivity coming down as a result.
Rostislav Shurma, Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Ukraine's enthusiasm for EU membership has put enlargement somehow back to the top of the political agenda. Now, Ukraine is, however, the largest and the most populous candidate country after Turkey. and is fighting the war of aggression for almost 2 years now with a full-scale invasion. So some EU voters in member states will be concerned about whether the EU can, so to say, digest Ukraine easily. What do you have to say about that? Also, given what Christian Levin just said about, in many cases, companies already working.
Frankly speaking, I've heard from Christian more about opportunities rather than challenges, and more about the stimulus for the competition. The European Union was much smaller when they took Poland, and they digested it. So I think this won't be a problem. The second, I think we should focus on the synergies. For the last 7 decades, I think we forgot that peace and security, this is not for granted. Because we had a very good period of continuous development, maybe with some financial pauses, but it was continuously growing and improving the quality of life of people. But then something happened that nobody of us in the civilized world could imagine. Please imagine that in your country, some other country comes in. What it will mean for your citizens. And it happens so that Ukraine has what to contribute in the EU. About the security, about the defense, about the military tech. Because even now, if we even look at the Ukrainian battlefield and we need to supply the armors and ammunitions, the European defense industry and military tech industry is not ready even to supply, not even to replace the warehouses, but just to supply the current needs. And we have this industry, and this is not our industry. This is the industry for the defense and security for the whole European Union. Another thing is about the economic synergies. The first is about the markets, because the new entrants, this is a big market for many companies. And at the same time, this is a very good contribution to manufacturing, to the domestication of some resources of the value chains. Because on the example of Ukraine, we do understand that we have people, very skilled, very well-educated people. And second, we have natural resources, which the European Union lacks at the moment. If you take the list of the critical minerals, iron ore, the biggest deposits and the biggest production of iron ore. Lithium, that we already mentioned during the discussion, the second biggest deposit in Europe. Graphite, the first biggest deposit. Manganese, and I think titanium, the biggest deposits in the world. So this is what we will contribute into the whole European Union. Oil and gas, the biggest deposits, and renewable potential for the renewables, for the onshore wind, for the territory, for the solar. So it will definitely make the whole system stronger and more sustainable. So I would look at this as a long-term business project where you get the very decent return investing in the development of those territories.
Prime Minister Spejčić, now most of the Western Balkans countries have been somehow stuck in this process, in the waiting room for like an entire generation. Your country, Montenegro, is specifically seen as one of the best performing candidate countries in the neighborhood. Now, what economic arguments do you use to make your case in Brussels for a speedier accession process?
Somebody who comes from a private sector like myself, it was pretty puzzling to see a situation that Montenegro and some other countries from the Western Balkans and the wider region, we lack that economic connection with the EU, actually. So when I became a technocrat minister of finance in 2020, we inherited a country that was infrastructure was fully built by the companies, financiers out of the EU. The main tourists, as a tourist country that receives millions of tourists every year, the main tourists were coming out of Russia. We did a lot to change that. So now a number of Russian tourists became like 7 or 8%. So it's way less, and dependence on the Russian market for tourism. We signed with EIB a big investment deal on our railways within Montenegro. So that was the first time ever that we get like such a big investment from Europe. Then with the private market, obviously, with the EU growth plan, what I tell to the EU guys is like, hey, it's not about that. Montenegro's finances are pretty healthy. We have 60% debt over GDP. We are like fiscal deficit within the Maastricht criteria. So we can finance most of the things ourselves. But the EU growth plan is so important because it's such a strong signal to the private sector. Montenegro used to be more like Mongolia or Kazakhstan in terms of the economic structure, but then we were like geopolitically or strategically, Brussels. So that discrepancy doesn't work long term. So if you want to be part of the club, you have to be both economy and value-based. So I think this is the winning combination, and I really think that EU has to step up their game, and I think they're doing it, finally. We are going to have a big investment cycle in the next 5 to 6 years in Montenegro. We expect EU companies and EU finance and EU's infrastructure vehicles to be much more active than they used to be before. And we are ready for that. And I think EU is finally ready.
We somehow have heard much more Western Europe leading the enlargement discussions over the past decade or decades. Should Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Balkans have a rather more equal saying? Mr. Schumann, what's your take on that?
Initially, I think there were the whole signs, because when the war started, I think that the Eastern European countries, and they were the strongest backers of joining Ukraine. But in fact, the last half a year, you see what's going on with the Ukrainian agri-products was blocking the borders. I think this is the case when the niche problems start impact the domestic politics. Overall, we feel the very strong support now as in ever of the core countries of the EU, like the Germany, like the France, like Italy, that are basically the core supporters. And we have seen this changing position of not every Eastern European, because the Bulgaria was quite, I would say, quite strong, but some of the European countries, in fact, Eastern European countries, have changed a little bit. You know what countries I'm referring to, their position, but I believe that the European values and the long-term strategic vision will win in this.
This is very interesting. How do we bring these business benefits into bigger, make it more important, also given Bulgaria's position when it comes to the Black Sea?
Well, I don't agree that first we are talking about Western Balkans because of Russia. It's simply not true. Remember the Bulgarian presidency of the Council with the Western Balkans Summit in 2018. For the first time, again, the Western Balkans were on the top of the European agenda. And after we already have seen the digital agenda, innovation agenda, the new growth plan that is right now, we have really now a huge investment. And I think that we should definitely here see how all together we can advance. Second, I must say that following my personal experience, when we have our foreign affairs ministerial meetings, it's always Central and Eastern Europe talking about enlargement, Western Balkans and Ukraine. It's me, it's my colleague from Slovenia, from Croatia. And I think that even sometime when we have some tensions, it's important to discuss. And I think that some of the reactions are because we have our experience and we don't want to see other countries with the feeling to be treated like second category of citizens. And I think that we should learn from the previous enlargement. I'm giving the example of Bulgaria, what that means, mechanism of cooperation, verification for more than 10 years, just that was ended last year. That's important, rule of law, democracy, but let's work since the very beginning. And I think, again, Bulgaria and Romania are not in Schengen. Why? All the technical criteria are fulfilled since 11 years. I think that sometime we should take a little bit of time and to discuss about this, because some of the reactions are not only internally motivated. They are because we would like somehow to anticipate and not to have the same attitude that we felt somehow during the years. And the other argument that I would like to use, we must stay much more focused to show how we can transform the challenges into opportunities. Bulgaria stopped the ban for the export of the Ukrainian grain. That was not an easy decision. 3 days, all farmers on the street. But we managed to explain to them that that's an extraordinary opportunity to increase the connectivity in this part of Europe, to talk about infrastructure, rail system or roads, and that means much more benefits for markets, for companies, for citizens. It's not easy, but I think that's why I'm not sure that we started again to talk about Western Balkans because only of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. I think that because we started finally not to talk only about chapters, Montenegro, I always remember the numbers, for many years we are talking about this, we started to talk about competitiveness, infrastructure, regions, young people, perspectives, security, independence, sovereignty, strategic choice. I think that that's why now we have a change of the agenda, but that's the right way. We should continue in this direction.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.